This is a Relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
We welcome you to this edition of Real Talk. It's Jesperson and Hicks on a Friday, heading into the Canada Day long weekend. We appreciate you joining us. Some of you may be streaming this on the Mixler live streaming audio app presented by California Closets from the road on your way out. Maybe you're pulling your trailer. Maybe you're already out at the lake. We appreciate you giving us your time, and we promise you we'll make it worth your while. In just a second, we're going to talk to one of the more than 100 physicians that co-signed an open letter to Alberta's Premier and to Alberta Health Services demanding an apology for how Alberta's former Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Deena Hinshaw, was unceremoniously dismissed from a new role in Indigenous health. It prompted the resignation of another prominent healthcare professional, Dr. Esther Tailfeathers. We'll get into it with Dr. Neeja Bakshi in just a moment. In the latter half of this show, we're going to check in with two Athabasca University professors as we try to process what went down this week at Athabasca University, where a man entered a gender studies classroom and stabbed three people, obviously facing charges. Thankfully, the three victims will recover from their injuries, so say authorities that are investigating this as a hate crime. That's coming up on this episode of Real Talk. First, we wanted to point out, of course, that housing prices are on the rise. You know that. We don't have to tell you. All the way across Alberta, and you know who's really riding that wave all the way to the bank? It's real estate agents. Really, there's no better time to become a real estate agent in Alberta, and there's no better place to do it than Rello. Rello is an online real estate school that gives you so much more than traditional courses do. They're going to help you pass your exams with confidence. Just check out their amazingly high pass rates on the RECA website, but they'll also give you access to expert instructors, free webinars, and membership in a thriving community of real estate professionals who can give your career a head start. Get the ball rolling today. Sign up now at Rello.ca. That's RELO.ca. Well, you probably, even as a casual news observer, would know the name Dr. Deena Hinshaw. She served through Alberta's, we talk about how we know these medical officers of health by name, and how do we know them by name? How do we feel that we almost in a way connect to them personally? It's because they navigated the waters through the COVID-19 pandemic. That's who did it for Alberta. That's who was steering the ship. It was Dr. Deena Hinshaw, who was then reassigned. She was placed in a role with Indigenous Wellness Corps. All of this, of course, aligning with the timing of Danielle Smith winning the leadership of the United Conservatives and becoming Alberta's Premier. Well, just a short time ago, Dr. Deena Hinshaw removed from that role with Indigenous Wellness Corps, and that leading the group's medical director, Dr. Esther Tailfeathers, to resign herself. More than 100 Alberta physicians have co-signed a letter demanding an apology and saying, quite frankly, they don't feel as though they're safe from the politics of healthcare themselves. It's interfering with what they perceive to be their own job security. Let's find out why it's a problem. Dr. Neeja Bakshi is one of the physicians that co-signed that open letter. She's an internal medicine physician at the Royal Alexandra Hospital in Edmonton and medical director of Park Integrative Health. Doctor, thank you so much for making time for us. A good Friday morning to you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Ryan.
Did you think twice about signing your name to that letter? There's probably some professional risk that comes along with it, isn't there?
There is, and I think that the fear of retribution, as I outlined in my tweet, and talking about, speaking out and advocacy is always something that's a little bit frightening, but I think that we feel very, very strongly about this. And actually, since we sent out the letter, we've had another additional 130 physicians sign. We're up to about 240 physicians that have signed this letter, and numerous that have emailed me fearful to put their name on the letter, but in full support of this. Okay, so
let's read. I'm going to read just a portion of this letter just so people that aren't familiar with it know what we're talking about and know what the ask is. Quote, we, the undersigned, writing as Alberta physicians to express grave concern over the decision to revoke Dr. Deena Hinshaw's contract with Alberta Health Services and the ensuing resignation of Dr. Esther Tailfeathers. Revoking Dr. Hinshaw's contract has caused significant harm, not only to Dr. Tailfeathers and Dr. Hinshaw, but also to the relationship between physicians and Alberta Health Services, Alberta Health, and most importantly, harm to Albertans. Albertans need health leadership to continue to focus on system improvement and advance Alberta's Indigenous health strategy. Dr. Hinshaw has been prevented from working for AHS. This is entirely unfair and unprofessional. Further, it signals to all physicians in this province that their positions are unsafe and could be targeted for political gain. There's no place for leadership which undermines the decisions, recommendations, and sovereignty of the Indigenous Wellness Corps, and no place for political interference in healthcare delivery. How many times have you signed an open letter in your career as a medical practitioner?
Unfortunately, more times than I can care to count in these last 3 years, to be honest. I think I've signed maybe 2 or 3 letters, and they're all of the similar kind of note and tone of we need some answers. We need some transparency. And again, that is what we're asking for in this letter. Previous open letters that we've said to the government is around the vaccine and around vaccination timelines for healthcare professionals, asking for more assistance in our healthcare overcapacity problems that we've had. And this is no different, that we're asking for transparency. We're asking for a seat at the table.
Has there been a response, as far as you know, to this letter at all? What have you seen after it was released?
So no official response. The letter was emailed to the Premier's office as well as Dr. Cowell. We've heard nothing from either one of them. We put the letter on Twitter, and kind of as we expected, we received comments from both sides of the fence here. A lot of people very supportive and wanting to get answers as well, and agreeing that there is no role for political interference in healthcare delivery. And then we've got a number of people that simply do not agree, and that is fair, and we welcome those comments. But I think the important piece to recognize is that we are asking for transparency, which I think all Albertans should ask for of their government.
Yeah, no kidding. It's interesting for me to have been paying attention to the public dialogue around this, and there's a lot of people saying, well, what did Dr. Hinshaw expect? What did she expect? She should have seen this coming. Can you respond to that from the perspective of a medical professional?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the really important pieces of our letter, and what is really infuriating to all of us is that Dr. Hinshaw went through a rigorous process with the AHS hiring system. When you're hired onto an AHS role, you have to go through a rigorous background check. You have to go through your credentials. You have to go through multiple rounds of interviews with the appropriate stakeholders. In this case would be Dr. Tailfeathers, who would be directly working with Dr. Hinshaw. And so what is very strange for us and what is bewildering for us is that from the time that Dr. Hinshaw was seemingly announced and appointed for this position to when she was unappointed or unhired, her qualifications didn't change. She didn't interview any differently. Nothing had changed from the reason for what she was hired for. And that really is what is concerning to us as physicians, that when we apply for roles or when we are appointed to roles, what security do we have if somebody higher up doesn't like us and wants to remove us?
Yeah. Now, the letter asserts that this is, the situation harmful to Dr. Tailfeathers and to Dr. Hinshaw. I think everyone can figure that out. Detrimental to the relationship between physicians and Alberta Health Services, pretty apparent and obvious. But then it says, most importantly, it brings harm to Albertans. Can you kind of spell that out for us, how you see that happening, or maybe how you see it manifesting right now?
Yeah, I think in 2 ways. I think acutely, the Indigenous Wellness Corps has lost a phenomenal leader, somebody who has really advocated for the healthcare and the accessibility for our Indigenous Albertans and our fellow Indigenous colleagues. It also is very harmful to Indigenous physicians, not only in Alberta, but really in Canada. And it signals that, whether that's the government or whomever made this decision, doesn't value Indigenous physician voices, which is an incredibly important voice for us to be able to deliver accessible and inclusive healthcare. But I think that the other piece of this as well is that allusion to the political interference. And so right now our healthcare system is in horrible shape. I can't mince words about it. We're in severe overcapacity. Patients aren't able to access the care that they need. And we continue as frontline leaders and frontline physicians to push AHS, to push Alberta Health, to push the government for assistance. And we've outlined it in many different realms in many different ways. And if we're not being heard, this is going to be detrimental to Albertans as patients, as people who need to access healthcare in real time. And if we can't if we can't assure Albertans that physicians are being heard, I don't know what else we could do.
On a side note, I'm not trying to sort of rub salt in the wound, doctor, but if I had 5 cents for every time I heard a doctor say, I don't know what more we can do over the past 3 years, I think I'd be a rich man. It's been like, to state the very obvious from a morale standpoint, and this isn't limited to Alberta at all, but from a morale standpoint, what a taxing few years for all healthcare professionals, including physicians like yourself.
Yeah, incredibly. I mean, I think that every day I feel like I could just copy paste the same text message to my group of physicians every single day of, thank you guys for your hard work. I know this sucks. I know there's not much we can do. We just got to put patients first and make sure that we are doing what we can for our patients. And I think right now what we're noticing is that it's becoming incredibly hard to do the jobs that we need to do for our patients because of the system. And morale is low. You can't be the physician, the nurse, the tech. You can't be the professional that you want to be when the system doesn't support you to do so. Yeah.
I'm not sure if most Albertans would know the name Dr. John Cowell, but just for background, when Danielle Smith, won the office of Premier by winning the UCP leadership initially last fall, she dismissed the 12-member board of Alberta Health Services and replaced that board. At that point, I think that it was intended to be temporary. Dr. Cowell named as the official administrator of AHS just about a week ago. I think it was June 22nd or 23rd. It was announced by the government that he'll continue to serve as the sole administrator of Alberta Health Services for the remainder of the year. When Premier Smith has been asked about this, in particular about Dr. Deena Hinshaw, Dr. Tailfeathers, she said, well, this is a question for Dr. Cowell. This is a question for the sole administrator of Alberta Health Services, not for the Premier. The letter is written to both of them. Can you see a world where Danielle Smith can get herself off the hook here? I mean, let's put the question this way. Why is it the Premier's problem, do you think?
I think that when you have a sole leader like Dr. Cowell, he's obviously answering to somebody, and that somebody is Premier Smith. And I think that if this was a personal issue between Dr. Cowell and Dr. Hinshaw, we need to know that. If this was a personal issue between Premier Smith and Deena Hinshaw, that we need to know that. It's very strange, and that's what makes it so bewildering, is that within AHS, within the hiring process, everything was done appropriately. Dr. Tailfeathers was involved in the hiring process. There's interviews, there's checks of credentials, et cetera, looking at Dr. Hinshaw's experience. And so where did the problem lie? Who told who that, no, we can't actually appoint Dr. Hinshaw? And whether that was Dr. Cowell or if that came from the government, we will never know. I don't think we'll ever get that answer. But to me, not having an entire AHS board with multiple different perspectives and having one sole person in charge, that's fishy to me.
Let me ask you this. The letter continues, quote, an essential tenet of being a physician is advocating for our patients and Albertans' health and well-being. The dismissal of Dr. Hinshaw has set off a cascade of events detrimental to patients and the sustainability of Alberta's Indigenous health strategy. Thus, the undersigned, the doctors, more than 100, now you said it's almost 250, requesting an investigation into the integrity and ethics of Dr. Hinshaw's dismissal. You're calling on the official administrator, Dr. Cowell, to publicly apologize to the two physicians. I hate to be a cynic. I would suggest that neither of those are going to happen. But why don't we talk about the sustainability of Alberta's Indigenous health strategy? Why don't we spend even a little bit more time talking about the importance of it? Do you consider yourself to be in a position to comment on it?
No, I would say that, while I work at the Royal Alexandra Hospital and we have a wonderful Indigenous community that we serve, I'm certainly not an expert in Indigenous health or the Indigenous services. But I can tell you that we know as a society, whether you're in Alberta, whether you're in the rest of Canada, that the access to care is even harder for those that identify as Indigenous patients. The amount of discrimination, the amount of limit to access that there is incredible. And in Alberta, in particular, with the Indigenous Wellness Corps, there has been a lot of work over the years for advocating for access, for grassroots efforts through different clinics. And I think that by doing this action and by having Dr. Tailfeathers resign, we really have done wrong by our Indigenous patients, because we, again, have said that your voice doesn't matter. And that is what is being perpetuated. That is what is being felt. And that is really what is happening with the dismissal of Dr. Hinshaw and the lack of recognition of Dr. Tailfeathers' input.
Dr. Bakshi, I know that your day is about to start officially. We really appreciate your time. Is there any important detail that I've not yet asked you about that you want to make sure that Real Talkers know before we head into the weekend?
I think that we as Albertans are very aware of the political influence on many of our decisions and many of the decisions that get made in the public sector. And I think that we have to continue to question our leaders. We have to question, who are they listening to? Are they listening to the people that are working 40, 50, 60, 70 hours a week, seeing these patients, trying to do right by their patients? And if they are, then how can they possibly be making these decisions?
That's Dr. Neeja Bakshi, a physician out of the Royal Alexandra Hospital and Park Integrative Health. Always has been a good friend and available to this show. We thank you for that. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, you bet. You can understand why this would be, for a lot of physicians, I think, the decision. I mean, even though there is strength in numbers, sure, to put it candidly, you wonder if you're going to wind up on a shit list.
Yeah.
You know, signing a letter like this.
100%.
Basically calling out the sole administrator who's just axed a very prominent physician.
But it also shows how much you give a shit.
Yes.
That you'd put yourself out like that, right?
100%. Yeah. So we sure appreciate that. If you're a healthcare professional, heck, if you're an Indigenous Albertan or an Indigenous person in Alberta and this is something that has resonated deeply with you, we sincerely request your feedback to this show. When we say we want to hear from you, we mean it. You can be in touch with us anytime to talk at ryanjesperson.com. You can hit us up on Twitter. You can use our hashtag or just find us on our account at RealTalkRJ. Wanted to let you know, friends, you may assume this. Obviously, we do have an interview request in with Dr. Esther Tailfeathers and of course, Dr. Deena Hinshaw. My suspicion is that the conditions of her dismissal would preclude her from going on the record, but you got to know that every journalist in Canada is trying to get Dr. Deena Hinshaw on the record. That's for sure. Just wait till her book comes out, John.
I can't wait.
Can you imagine?
Bestseller.
That would be a bestseller for sure. I mean, I think of Bonnie Henry and all the other chief medical officers of health that were in the trenches through the course of this pandemic. But I think Dr. Hinshaw had unique factors at play that a lot of the other medical officers didn't. And you and I talked about her arc of popularity the other day, where she rocketed to stardom.
Went from, what are you going to do? How are you going to help us? To hero of the day, to being on T-shirts, to just being put in the ditch, and
people basically saying, well, she's doing Jason Kenney's bidding, and she's the one that doesn't have the guts to stand up to Premier Kenney and all this, and I think that it did require some education for us citizens to understand the role that a chief medical officer of health plays, and the input that they provide, who that input is provided to, and then where the impetus lies. Whose job is it ultimately, put it this way, who's making the decisions when it comes to health policy through a pandemic, et cetera. And ultimately, that's the politicians, that's the Minister of Health, and that's the Premier. It's not the Chief Medical Officer of Health. The Chief Medical Officer of Health does not override the Premier, right? In so many ways as in the federal position, they do not override the Prime Minister or the federal health minister. You can let us know what you think on this. We'd love to hear from you. These conversations happen because of sponsors like our friends at Friesen Brothers, who are rolling out the red carpet for you this weekend. That's right, it's the Canada Day long weekend, and they've got you covered. If you're going to be hosting, or maybe you're attending somebody's party, you want to bring something that's going to be a big hit. June has been pork month. As we head into July, we want to remind you it's barbecue season, and they've got their Ivan's sausages ready to go. They've got like the spicy ones. They got the sweet German. They've just got the original OG. I mean, that's my personal favorite, to be honest with you. These are great at breakfast. They're great on a bun. They're great through the day. Do not walk past the Friesen Brothers original barbecue sauces without grabbing one for yourself. And don't forget, if you actually are on July 1st, Canada Day, doing grocery shopping at Friesen Brothers, they're going to knock 15% off your bill. Any purchase over $75, 15% off at Friesen Brothers, Alberta grown and Alberta owned. If you're looking to bring something to your Canada Day party that's, pretty cool, if you will, why not consider a DQ Canada Day cake from the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. You can kick up your July 1st festivities with one of these customizable cakes with red and white frosting. Talk about elevating your tablescape. This dessert adds way more fun to an already awesome day. And of course, you can order one ahead of time. You're going to want to do that today to make sure that they get the design right. Or you can visit a DQ in Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, Westmount, Baseline Road, and just grab one ready to go out of the freezer. They've got you covered. If you're going to be hanging out with pals like Johnny, make sure you grab a box or two of dairy-free dilly bars as well along the way. Make sure everybody has a great day, courtesy the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. Shout out to our friends at Kubi Renewable Energy. We want to remind you that they're hiring right now. This weekend could be a game changer for somebody that, I don't know, did you just have a bit of a bummer, a bit of a kick in the teeth? Maybe you just got laid off from a position that you never thought that you'd be leaving, but you're an experienced installer. Maybe you're an electrician, you've got your ticket, or you're an apprentice, and you want to work for a company that has investment matching and pays for you to educate yourself and has cold beer on tap. You want to work in BC or Alberta, maybe road trips to Northwest Territories or Saskatchewan to install solar and help kickstart the green energy movement in Canada? Don't delay. Check out kubienergy.ca. And don't forget, on Tuesday next week, we'll present Positive Reflections, somebody's day that was made by a random act of kindness. That's always proudly presented by our friends at Kubi Renewable Energy. And speaking of those that are hiring, we also wanted to note that Apex Automation is in the exact same situation. This is one of Canada's fastest growing companies, period, let alone in the automation space, and they're looking for all kinds of engineering talent. That's right, it doesn't, quite frankly, matter what type of engineer you are, they'll find a fit for you. I mean, they're looking for electrical engineers, instrumentation, computer science, process engineers, mechanical engineers, instrument techs, electricians. You get the idea. They've got field offices across Western Canada, even down in Texas, and they'd love to add you to their team. Corporate culture at Apex Automation is a thing. This is a company you want to work for if you're a talented engineer. Trust me, Johnny and I, we look after their Christmas party for them. Would you say there's something special about the team at Apex Automation?
I don't even remember the Christmas party, but I'm sure it was special.
Well, for what it's worth, Johnny, you did a great job. You did a really great job.
Thank you.
You can check out the careers link today at apexautomation.ca. Sad news yesterday, as it was confirmed that an absolutely beloved Canadian, a broadcast and sex ed icon, Sue Johanson, passed away surrounded by family in a long-term care center at the age of 93. She was best known for her Sunday night sex show and the spin-off show that actually really caught on in the United States as well, Talk Sex with Sue Johanson. I walked in here this morning. We knew that we wanted to mention Sue, and I said, because this was a sincere question to you, I said, Johnny, are you old enough to know the name Sue Johanson?
You're always dating me.
I thought you're just a youngin', but you looked at me, you said, of course.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like every Canadian from like 30 to 90 knows Sue.
The radio show started in the 80s. I remember like 85, 86, she went to TV. And then I think everyone remembers when it went to the Women's Television Network, especially in 96 to like 2000 and something. But she was everywhere. And, my mom's a health nurse. She was director of medical services at Durham College for 30 years. So she'd often work with my mom. She'd come to the college. She's from Thornhill, Ontario. So
your mom knew her personally?
Well, yeah, she worked with her. She would come and give, sex education talks and discussions at Durham College and now the university. But I just remember the show. It was like nothing that was going on at that time. It was blunt, to the point, sex talk from someone who you wouldn't expect it from, this older woman on TV. And it was refreshing because back then, I mean, if you grew up back then, the 80s and 90s, the sex education in school was not the best. And she was just, she was on TV putting condoms on bananas and telling people how to do it properly and talking about how to please your partner and all these things that nobody was talking about on TV,
of things,
especially in Canada at the time. So she was just, like you said, an absolute icon, someone who was pushing the boundaries at that time.
I love this comment from Tracy in our YouTube live chat. She says, here's a fun fact about Sue Johanson. I was watching her show one evening, and one of my friends called in with a question.
The call-ins were the best.
Tracy says, I got to learn more about my friend than I ever wanted to know. That's amazing. I remember listening Sunday nights, obviously late Sunday night, quietly listening on a radio in my room as a young kid, like as a teenager, like I would say, 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, with a lot of questions and my parents were always very open. My parents were, were like, they didn't shy away. My dad's a physician, so you could always kind of get like the actual like biological or medical explanation.
If you grew up with a medical professional, you're
but
probably...
plus, my parents were always very accessible, you know, but also we grew up in a culture, and I say the collective we, at the time where I think some of the stuff was a little bit more taboo. Like I can't be the only one that wasn't asking my parents about, a lot of stuff, masturbation, anal beads, condoms, same-sex relationships, female orgasms, the clitoris, like all of these things that you have legitimate questions about.
100%.
But you're too embarrassed to ask.
And especially in the 80s and 90s, she was dispelling myths about AIDS. She was talking about, the gay movement and all these things that were still not in the mainstream. They were a little bit still taboo.
And she didn't make people feel stupid, and she wasn't sensational. Like, she was a great broadcaster and a great storyteller, but she was very credible, which I think went a long way. I know that everybody has their own stories. I mean, we're seeing it right now in our live chat. We knew this would happen. Alberta Girl says she was a trailblazer. 80s Fanify. She was amazing. Sylvia says she was so straightforward and she didn't embarrass anybody about their questions. Sylvia, that's such a good way to put it.
That's what I was talking about.
Didn't make anybody feel stupid.
No.
I saw a Twitter thread. I don't know this person, but I wanted to share it. This is from someone on Twitter, CJ Toronto. CJ Toronto, I want to share their story. He says it was April 1986. Not a great time to be a gay teenager. Things were much different then. Gay rights were virtually non-existent, much needed resources, hard to come by. And if you had any questions, well, good luck to you. Enter Sue Johanson. To this day, CJ says, I don't know what prompted me to record the Sunday night sex show on Q107 that night, but it would change my life in ways I couldn't have imagined at the time. That particular Sunday night, Sue's guest was David Kelly, a gay activist and an educator and a frequent guest on Sunday Night Sex on Sue's show. He was Sue's go-to expert on all things LGBTQ in the 80s. And as the Maxwell tape slowly turned on my boombox, Johnny, you remember recording radio back in the day?
Yeah.
Hey, you'd always wish that the announcer would shut up so you could get the clean recording of the song. As the Maxwell tape slowly turned in my boombox, Sue and David had a wonderful conversation about gay rights, the need for acceptance and change in society, and how vital it was for young LGBTQ kids to be accepted and loved by their parents. Why was I recording this? I had no idea. I had just met my first boyfriend earlier that year, and I had no intention of rocking the boat by coming out to my mom. I was so paranoid that somebody would discover the tape that I literally put a padlock through the cassette. Again, it was the 80s. They were different times. Long story short, a few months later, says CJ, my mom would stumble upon me and my boyfriend making out on the couch in the family room, and my coming out story was born. After the initial confrontation, Mom stopped talking to me for a while. I guess it was a lot to absorb. And then one day it occurred to me that maybe she could benefit from listening to that Sunday night sex show that I had recorded a few months earlier. So I removed the padlock and left the tape in her room with a note. Not long after that, we started talking again. I don't know why this is making me emotional. It's not even my story. I don't even know this person. She thanked me for the tape and, much to my surprise, said that she thought it would be a good idea if we made an appointment at Central Toronto Youth Services to go have a chat with David Kelly, the guest on that episode, Sue's resident gay expert. And so we did. And that's when everything changed. David and my mom had an instant affinity for each other. He helped her understand all the things she was feeling and going through. He started out as a lifeline for her and quickly turned into a cherished friend. With David's support, Mom would go on over the next few years to become one of the original P-flag parents in Southern Ontario. Not content with simply being there for parents struggling with their child's sexuality, she felt she needed to do more, and she did. And from 1988 till about 95, my mom would tour all over Southern Ontario and the U.S. Northeast, giving presentations on LGBTQ rights and acceptance in high schools with David Kelly and Sue Johanson. So impactful was the presence of a parent at these presentations that Sue and David called her their secret weapon. The three of them together changed and saved lives, and I still have the letters that my mom kept from parents and kids alike to prove it. They moved the needle on gay rights in Canada. Of that, I have absolutely no doubt. I remain immensely proud of them and thankful for everything they did and accomplished together, and none of it would have happened without Sue's Sunday night sex show. Says CJ, rest in peace, Sue. Say hi to Mom and David for me. Thank you for everything you did. I'm lucky to have known you.
Amazing.
Isn't that incredible?
And if you haven't seen it, go see the documentary. It won a Canadian Screen Awards award for documentary program of the year in 2023, just back in April. Sex with Sue, a film about Canada's sex grandma, which is the perfect title for her.
She was
yeah.
Canada's sex grandma.
Yeah, it's just someone, you always have those feelings that certain people are going to be around always, you know what I mean? And then you hear something like this and you're like, oh, just ruins our long weekend ahead of it. But yeah.
You can let us know, of course, what you think about this. We continue to remind you about our email address because we love hearing from you. Coming up in about 25 minutes, we're going to read a few messages, some of them written with a blowtorch as we get into trash talk. But before that, we want to get to a story that's obviously been a very difficult one to process, a horrific story out of the University of Waterloo earlier this week. A stabbing that wounded 3 people in a gender studies class, say investigators was motivated by hate. It was 2 days ago on Wednesday when a man entered a classroom at the University of Waterloo in Hagee Hall, stabbing a professor and 2 students. We're going to be speaking with a couple professors from Athabasca University who teach in this space, in women's and gender studies. Police have confirmed, investigators, that they are investigating this as a hate crime. But we wanted to bring you a portion of a chilling interview.
This is heavy.
This is global news. The interview is conducted by their crime reporter out of Toronto. This is Catherine McDonald, presented by Amar Khan. This is a sit-down with a man by the name of James Chow, who was in that classroom as this went down.
The professor replied, "Oh, no, you're probably in the wrong class." Then he said, "Oh, what class is this?" The professor replied, this is a gender class or philosophy of gender class. The man then replied and said, "Oh, can I stay?" The professor then said to him, "We need to continue our class. Could you please leave?" And while the man was listening to her reply, he put down his backpack in front of him at his feet, and he pulled out a knife. It still had one of those sheaths or covers on it, like a plastic one. And the thing that disgusts me the most is that this vile, mischievous smile that he had on his face. And immediately the professor's face just turned to pure fear. And also the other classmates were starting to scream. He raised the knife and started chasing the professor. She ran down the middle of the classroom. So our classroom is like a rectangle, but there's only one entrance at the front where the man had entered. And she ran to the back of the class. At this point, it was just pandemonium. Everyone was screaming. And what I remember was just being near the front row, sitting in fear, thinking, what's going on? My professor was running in the back, being chased by this guy. And the whole time, I don't think he said anything. He was just chasing her. And I thought in the heat of the moment, I need to at least attack him or injure him. So I grabbed a chair right as he cornered the professor in the back of the room and threw a chair at him. And when I threw the chair, I remember seeing the professor was on the ground covering her face and screaming. And I threw the chair, and then the next thing I know, I was running outside with a bunch of the other students, and I was screaming to them, get out of the building now. Because, don't be in the building, just leave.
It's chilling. And of course, this has made an impact, this crime, across the country and around the world. People quite rightfully are remembering that horrific day at Montreal's École Polytechnique, where in particular, women were targeted by a gunman in a classroom. I'm grateful that these next 2 guests have made themselves available to talk this out. Dr. Kristin Rodier is an assistant professor of philosophy at Athabasca University. She teaches in the philosophy of gender and sexuality. We also welcome to the program Dr. Alexa DeGagne, an associate professor of women's and gender studies at Athabasca University. She teaches courses on queer and transgender politics and social movements in Alberta and beyond. Doctors, I want to thank you for joining us this morning. Dr. Rodier, do you remember your initial response the moment that you first heard about what went down at Waterloo?
I do. I was actually contacted through, people who teach in this area. It's a small number of people. And so people reached out to me and said, I want to talk to you about something before it's on the news. We know of something that happened. And so we were contacting each other within our network of people to kind of take care of each other while we found out what had happened. So my initial reaction was just feeling terrible for everyone who was there, and hoping that they're safe and that they're going to get some time away to recover and to get support. That would have been my initial reaction. Of course, I had thoughts about what this means in general, but yeah.
And I want to just let our audience know that for the next 20 minutes or so, we're just going to let those free flow. I'm grateful that both of you are here. We could pursue a million angles on this conversation, and a lot of them I think are important conversations that publicly we're not yet having, and that's probably unacceptable, to be honest. Dr. DeGagne, what was your very first thought when you very first heard about it?
Yeah, thank you. Honestly, it was that this is incredibly disheartening and gut-wrenching, but not shocking. It feels like a sort of inevitability, not inevitability, but sort of given the amount of hate and sort of false rhetoric that's been proliferating, and in a really intense way in the past 5 or 10 years, it just felt like it was a matter of time before something like this happens. And as Kristin said, talking to colleagues and students and friends, that there is a fear, there's a constant fear that there's going to be some sort of, if not verbal attack, online, physical attack in these spaces. That's sort of a constant condition these days of teaching things related to gender, race, indigeneity, and queer and trans theories.
Like, are you saying, and I'm inclined to agree with you, but the two of you are way more educated in this space. You have obviously way more experience in this space. Johnny and I, and even guests on this show this week, have been talking about this. I mean, the eruption at the Leduc Council meeting, talking about the Progress Pride flag. I mean, the boycott around Bud Light. I mean, we can get to all of this. Dr. DeGagne, in follow-up to your comment, why do you think that this is ramping up so much? I think it's undeniable that it is. The evidence is all around us. What's behind it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess why I say it wasn't shocking is because there's continuous cycles and sort of historical trends of these things happening, right? So in times of economic strife, in times of pandemics, in times of war, there is sex panics brew. And that's for a number of reasons, including to have a common enemy, to rally people around, to stoke fear, to divert people's attention, to sort of scapegoat and blame people. And so it's a perennial tool that's used for all of those reasons. And the thing that's happening now is it's incredibly distressing. It's incredibly enraging, and it's also using a lot of the same rhetoric that's been constantly used, right? Like it's a regurgitation of things that we've heard time and time again relating to queer, trans, and gender nonconforming people in these times of like huge social unrest, right? So it's charted, people see these waves coming, and we brace ourselves. But yeah, and I mean, Kristin can talk to this more too, but I think because of the way the internet and social media is currently functioning, that it's sort of proliferating in new ways that need to be tracked and accounted for. But yeah, I don't know if Kristin wants to speak to sort of that piece.
Yeah, let's touch on that.
Well, I think that there's always a sense or a distortion around questions of what happened in the academy, right? The way that, there are suspicions, I think, because it is such an elite context, separate from a lot of, everyday sort of working context. And so there's this kind of separation, but that can also fuel kind of fear and distortion. And I think that there's a special targeting around feminist intellectuals, critical intellectuals, people who are, bringing up racism, bringing up social justice, bringing up topics around gender and sexuality. And I think that there's been this kind of stereotype or trope that's been exploited on social media in the wake of like sort of anti-woke backlash around like sort of gotcha clips on gender studies professors, like gender studies professor is asked what gender is and can't answer. See, they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, you're talking about Matt Walsh, right?
I don't know. I can't track how many different people I've seen do that
Fair.
stuff, but it is pretty widespread. And, they did some research on sort of how many clicks it takes to get yourself to a lot of this anti-trans, anti-gender studies professor clips, I guess you could call it, on social media. And it's just right there. And it's really being mobilized against, feminist intellectuals, which there's always been sort of backlash about bringing in critical perspectives.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of intellectuals and people in this space. I mean, one, I wish I could. To be honest, I was reading so many tweets about this, and I didn't happen to record them all. But there was one professor who said, when you work in this field, Dr. DeGagne, it's kind of like what you said. She said, when you work in this field, oftentimes you're not thinking if something like this might happen, but when, which was a real gut punch. I've seen a lot of people talking about, and I don't think that the square ever, the blame ever solely lands on politicians, but I sure don't think they should be taken off the hook. There's a lot of talk, especially among conservative politicians, and I mean, the evidence is everywhere. This is not a controversial statement, that they're fighting against what they believe to be kind of a woke takeover of university and college campuses, across the country and around the world. We don't know specifically what motivated this attack, but I think investigators saying within the first 48 hours that they are investigating it as a hate crime is significant, right? Is there a way to turn down the temperature and have a conversation about these things, or in this day and age? I mean, Alexa, you talk about the way that social media is operating right now. I mean, I just feel slimy about participating in it. To be honest with you, it feels like it's just skidding into the ditch and drawing out the worst in everybody. Like, have we lost our ability to have an informed conversation about, quite frankly, people's lives?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I guess, those questions of like, how do we solve this, or feel very thorny and huge. But what I do keep in mind, and I think what's really important to remember in this situation, is that with all of the rhetoric of what universities are doing and all these sorts of things, like Kristin and I teach hundreds of students. Students want this information. They want to have these discussions. And Kristin brought this point up that, this affinity for Sue Johanson, like, people desperately want the information. They want the information presented in clear, thought out, well-researched ways. And our students come to us wanting to have discussions, being open and curious. And the way that our classrooms function is far different than what is presented and what is characterized and caricatured in terms of how things are discussed and what opinions are allowed to proliferate and all of those sorts of things. And I was struck by an interview that I saw of a student relating to this incident. And the student said that, she had thought that the classroom was supposed to be a safe space to sort of learn and to spend that time of your life really engaging with these different theories. And I think we've seen in the past decade or longer that there's been this absolute false criticism of what happens in a gender or critical race theory class in terms of like political correctness policing and all of these sorts of things. And the safe spaces that women's and gender studies profs and students were initially talking about were exactly safety against this kind of incident. Like, this is what people were guarding against, is this kind of violence based on, reactions and feelings about what happened in Montreal 30 years ago or 40 years ago, right? So I think it's really, the frustration is sort of remembering that we're talking about like people, that we're talking about humans, and all of this rhetoric that sort of comes out is just a complete false characterization of what happens in classrooms, what students want, the amazing work that students are doing and the discussions that they're having, the maturity with which they approach these topics, the respect, the curiosity. Like, these classrooms are honestly and can be incredibly enriching, beautiful places. And it's yeah, I can throw it back to you, but that's just sort of one of the huge frustrations I think that a lot of us experience.
Let me get you off of the hook just real quick and say in our Real Talk roundtables, we encourage people to go on thought journeys. So don't ever feel like you got to hand the conch back. We want to hear what you have to say. You two are the experts, not me. Dr. Rodier, I want to put this comment in front of you. This is from an educator who's watching right now live on YouTube. This is Jillian, who says, okay, so this is the part where we all pretend like we're shocked, and then we have important conversations, and then we move on and forget, because no one's really interested in challenging the root causes of male violence, not all men, etc. Jillian says very little has changed since École Polytechnique. Media still writes articles with headlines like "Woman Dies" instead of "Man Kills Woman." What would you say to that comment?
Geez, there's a lot there. I do think it is really important to draw attention to how these particular incidents are framed. So how do we have our not to say we're policing how we have conversations about it, but that we're critically reflecting on how we're having these conversations on it. What are the headlines? Who is speaking about these incidents? What kinds of people are being taken as experts even on the matter, right? Like, it's great to be here to speak specifically as someone who teaches in gender studies classrooms, talking about what this kind of attack is like for me and for Alexa and for others. And so I do think it's, the whole point of a lot of our courses is to think about that root issue. And that is exactly why we are, I think, the target of a lot of backlash, because of how critical and intense our discussions are, thinking about these root causes, looking at the history, making connections with race, class, disability, and talking about how, sexuality is this kind of flashpoint for social structures and power. One of the problems with framing is often to kind of individualize the incident, say this is one person who did a bad thing, right? And what our discipline or our activist sort of mindset is to think of things more systemically, because there is a pattern, and so it is a case of an individual doing a thing that can be true, but that individual is part of a system, part of a culture, part of a structure. And so we have to hold both things at the same time and have a more complex discussion. And that's often what we're doing in these classes. And that really challenges liberal individualism. I'm thinking here about pushback against the inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women, and the ways in which Stephen Harper said, this is not a sociological issue, this is a criminal issue. And if it's a criminal issue, why is it so patterned? Why is it so pervasive? Why is it not taken seriously within law enforcement? If it's just an individual crime, what do we do about this pattern? And that's what we're trying to critically push the discussion towards. And we're having a lot of backlash because there's a lot of powerful, dominant conversations around individualism, and normative sexuality and gender. People really trying to say, no, but this is what gender is. This is what sexuality is. And I always ask my students, I say, if gender and sexuality is this natural, binary, heterosexual thing, why is there so much work enforcing it? Mm-hmm. It's just so self-defeating, and just the attempts to cover over existing diversity that we can point to that has always been there. And it's such a waste of energy, and it really harms people, and it results in incidents like this.
How much of this, Alexa, do you think is, I mean, if I can maybe, at risk of oversimplifying this, sometimes I think people fear or push back on or fight against what they don't understand. I had a very interesting exchange with a guy a couple of months ago, and he was talking about in his community how he supported his community, a small Alberta community, a rural community. He supported them flying the pride flag during Pride Month, and he considers himself to be an ally. And he goes, I'll be honest with you. He goes, I think I understand the L, the G, and the B. He goes, but I don't understand the T. He doesn't understand the trans community. Now, this is a guy that was open-minded. He did not make his comment critically or out of hate. It was a moment of vulnerability. But I wonder, bigger picture. I mean, I referenced this Bud Light boycott. Bud Light, I think everybody knows by now, partnered with, Bud Light partners with thousands of people, thousands of influencers. Their promo campaigns are all over the place, but I'm showing her now on my screen. This is Dylan Mulvaney, a trans influencer, a social media personality, and entertainer. And Bud Light sent a customized can to celebrate Dylan's 1-year anniversary, as a trans woman. And I think it was just kind of like, I think it's safe to say that Bud Light, Anheuser-Busch, probably didn't anticipate the blowback or the degree to which this campaign would blow up. But, I mean, the pushback on this, I'm not comparing these, to be clear. I remember when people were upset that Earl's was sourcing their beef out of the United States and they were going to boycott Earl's for a while. But we've got like prominent celebrities. I mean, Kid Rock with his AR-15, like blowing up cases of Bud Light. I mean, with rapid fire weapons. I know some people might, but look, this is a fact. I mean, that is a violent expression. It's in a way, to be honest with you, it strikes me as a subtle call to arms. I mean, I don't know what other way there is to interpret this. Is this because people just fear what they don't understand, or am I oversimplifying it?
Yeah, I think it's a number of things. So I think like sort of thinking through what Kristin said as well, or what you said at the end of your piece there, that there's several ways to come into this. So it's when we think of sort of heterosexuality and cisgender sort of forms of life, how sort of extreme people go to try to reinforce that those are the best and the most normal ways of existing. Like how ludicrous and absurd it is to shoot a beer can with a semi-automatic gun or whatever it was. And like, it's like, so that you're trying to tell us as communities and societies that is the most rational, normal, moral way of existing. And it has to be reinforced by shooting a beer can that had somebody's face on it. Like it's just that absurdity, right? It's just sort of showing, that there's a huge amount of fear there, but there's a huge amount of violence ingrained in this kind of reinforcement of gender and sexuality, binaries, identities, characteristics, norms, all of those sorts of things. And I think like in these moments of violence, it's incredibly important to point out that so often it is violence that it takes to reinforce these things. And that demonstrates that they aren't the most natural or the only, they aren't the most moral or the inevitable like ways that humans express themselves in terms of gender and sexuality. So that would be the first piece. And the second piece, and the name of the activist and thinker is escaping me, and I feel terrible about that, but there is a trans activist and thinker who has said, there are so many things in our society that we don't understand, but we respect. And we can think of like, I don't understand astrophysics, but I respect the people working on, rockets who are working for NASA and not maybe private corporations. to get the rockets up there. I respect when they tell me how the solar system functions, and I don't necessarily understand the intricacies of it, right? And I think that this sort of this impulse to say, if I don't completely understand what you're talking about, I'm not going to respect your humanity, is just sort of a false position, like not a false position to take, but it is a dangerous position to take. And I'm not sure it's helpful. And I think we can think of so many examples in our lives when we don't understand something, but we respect the people who are saying it because it's their life, it's their experience, it's what they believe, and it's not harming anybody. And I think with trans and sexuality issues, that someone's existence as a trans and gender nonconforming person is not harming anybody. And in fact, it's opening up sort of the world to all of these creative and beautiful ways to exist, right? So I think that sort of that sort of both sides of that you have the existence of folks who you might not understand, but are causing you no harm. And then on the other side of that, you have people who are responding to that existence with violence. Like I think that's sort of the piece that we have to come to terms with, is that's what's going on here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it maybe Dr. Julia Serrano that you're thinking of? Maybe I just did a quick Google search.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
But I will text my people.
Yeah, sure. Well, we'll put. Hey, if you texted us, we'll put it in the show notes. How about that? Yeah. So then people can reference the show notes on YouTube or of course on the podcast. But here's the thing, that the assertion, what you're saying, the reality that trans people, that human beings are doing no harm to others. This is, it flies in the face with the message coming from the conspiracy theorists, right? Coming from the people protesting outside elementary schools, coming from the people that are smearing and spreading these falsities on social media and in real life, right? I mean, I don't even like to say the stuff out loud, but talking about groomers and talking about, children in schools having their genitals mutilated. I mean, these are the types of things that we hear about.
They always bring in the children.
They always bring in the children,
well,
right?
That's very intentional, right?
Of course. Yeah. And so I guess the question is, what do regular, decent, educated, empathetic, reasonable people, human beings like us, like this listening audience, what do we do about it? What's the call to action? Jillian in our live chat is saying she's sick of all talk, no action. What's the call to action here, Dr. Rodier?
That's a big ask for me. Honestly, I do want to think about having these conversations as an action itself also. So I don't want to discount the fact that we're having this conversation as though it doesn't do anything. But I also would not want to stop there. So we need, institutional supports at universities for, let's say, a kind of informed, community-based way of helping critical academics do their work without harassment and without fear of attack in their classes. A lot of people that I've talked to about this incident have said, well, wasn't there security? How exactly would that work, right? Our classrooms are open doors, our buildings are open. And so that, to me, the increased securitization of the university doesn't seem like a good option. What I would say, though, is, paired with these conversations, we need, concrete supports. Like I was thinking also about this incident and sort of the sensational nature of it and the way that it's sort of like, a lone madman with a gun, with a knife or whatever it might be. And just thinking about all of the everyday ways that people are also attacked, harassed, harmed, violence is done to them on the basis of sex, gender, race, sexuality, and the ways in which, we need to make connections from that to this. So we need to think better about, social responses to violence that will better support this incidences of this nature. So bringing in community members, people with lived experiences of these topics to help with social responses, political responses, get some dollars going. It's evidence-based. If we get money into community organizations that support people who are victims of violence, that will pull them out of, these issues, but working for systemic and community-based change. That would be my initial response. Yeah.
Can I just say
back
too,
to your friend, your open-minded friend who doesn't understand.
Yeah, I don't know this person, to be clear, but they struck up a conversation. I mean, I consider them to be a friend. They're an audience member,
Okay.
but yeah, I don't know much about them.
I just want to say that that's a great place to start. And I really, I'm trained to think critically about the term open-minded. So it's one of these things where, everyone wants to be seen as open-minded. Everyone thinks of themselves as open-minded. It's other people that are closed-minded. Mm-hmm. And what it can be is a kind of trigger word for thinking about who does and does not have common sense. And so for me, open-mindedness, the proof is in the pudding. So like, how do you actually act around things that are different from you? To me, that's really where it goes. And I've had students come into my gender studies classroom and say, hey, I have never heard anything before about this critical analysis of gender or sexuality. And, I'm here to learn, but I'm starting from scratch. And we have long conversations walking down the hall together. We grab coffees. When someone is really coming from that position, I will dig in and put in the work, really helping and supporting my students. And so I want people to know that our classrooms are supportive environments when people come in without background knowledge.
Mm. Yeah, I know that it feels like you said this 10 minutes ago, but I just wanted to circle back on the security thing. I just think that's such a ludicrous, like on one hand, first of all, I think it sends a detrimental message. If you're going to have, what are you going to have, armed security just outside women's and gender studies classes? Like, number one, what does that say? It kind of reinforces the negative messaging, I think, that this is a hot button, divisive, polarizing, kind of a thing. I think that sends a wrong message. And also, I think, I don't know, I think tragically, there are thousands of examples of what is referred to, I don't even know if it's a preferred term anymore, but gay bashing. I think of Matthew Shepard in Montana. Like we talk about human beings that are targeted oftentimes, like they feel like they're on an island in a community, or they're on their own, or they're always looking over their back, or they're always worried about their own personal safety. I don't think that growing up in a time where I think, I'm a child of the 70s and people are becoming more aware of these issues and understanding them more. But I don't have to explain to you two or talk to you two about how this was described for many years, LGBTQ as a lifestyle, as a choice. And people would sit there and say, like, there are easier lives to choose than someone who is living their true self. And I just, I look at the generation to come and I wonder if maybe, and I'd be curious for your take on this, Alexa, like 20 years from now, this next generation, I don't know, these issues, these polarizing, hot button, divisive issues don't seem to be issues with the next generation. I don't know. Do you think we're still going to be having conversations like this in 20 years?
Yeah, I guess it's hard. It's a hard question because I'm sure 20 years ago in the year 2000, we were like, are we going to have these conversations in 20 years? It's 2023 and we are. Yeah. And so I think that's sort of, what I'm talking about this like perennial nature of it, and how our communities are continually sort of scapegoated and demonized in these moments of like social and political unrest and strife, right? Like it's a well-worn playbook. So to me, and sort of adding to what Kristin was saying about like, how do we advocate for this? Where do we go forward? I think, especially in Alberta, that curriculum from K to 12 is so incredibly important. And there have been advocates doing an incredible amount of work to make sure that Alberta's curriculum is presents these topics at all, but also presents them in a way that is respectful and that sort of honors the people who are in the classroom. Queer and trans students have been in classrooms forever, and they will be forever. And it's just a matter of like whether you make their lives hell or whether you sort of create a learning environment where they can be who they want to be, right? So I think in Alberta, in terms of a tangible thing that people can focus on, because we know we've seen through the United States, we've seen in New Brunswick, we've seen in Alberta, that in Ontario, that curriculum relating to these issues is such a huge battleground. And it is because I think people recognize the power of education, the power of talking about these issues from a young age, and really paying attention to, and again, going back to not falling into the trap of sort of believing what you hear online or through gossip, but actually looking at what people are proposing to put in curriculum, to actually looking at like past and best practices for curriculum. I know that involves work, but advocacy and activism involves work. It involves education, it involves knowing what's going on. And that's how we counter sort of these rumors and these like misinterpretations or purposeful misrepresentations of what's going on. So I think if we want a situation where in 20 years, the current generation that is coming through K-12 doesn't have these inflammatory conversations where they aren't inflicting violence on queer and trans people in all facets of life, then we do have to look at something, and we have to like advocate seriously for robust and responsible curriculum from K-12. And I really see that as sort of the coming battle in Alberta that people need to be really plugged into.
That's Dr. Alexa DeGagne, an associate professor of women's and gender studies at Athabasca University. We've also been joined by Dr. Kristin Rodier, an assistant professor of philosophy at AU, teaching in the philosophy of gender and sexuality. Much respect to you both, and thank you for making yourselves available to talk about some tough but extremely important subject matter. We sure appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Real Talkers, I see there's obviously the live chat is going right now. A lot of people were talking about that ridiculous scenario in Kelowna, I think it was that the Star family? Remember this 9-year-old girl participating in a track event? And it was like a grandparent of somebody else or some guy that was there demanding basically he wanted to see her birth certificate. He didn't believe that she was born a girl and all this kind of thing. And her family just was like,
Kelowna's like a little bubble. When we went there, we were thinking, oh, we're going back to BC. Everyone's open minded. Kelowna's like a little Alberta bubble out there. There was a lot of protesting, a lot of stuff going on, especially during COVID when we were out there. That was like alarming to me and my partner. Jillian here on the text line says gender studies should be mandatory. Absolutely agree.
100%.
Like gender studies, sex ed needs to be taught earlier. And people keep talking, our children. Would you rather your kids learn about sex from like the horrible things on the internet, like porn and these memes and horrible things on social media that are misinformation? Like, we should be teaching everyone about this as early as we can.
Well, this is a real issue. Number one, I mean, we keep talking about we're going to do a show on porn, and we need to just deliver on that.
And we were joking at first, but we really
I was never joking about it. But
we really need to.
Yeah, and number one, because there's this thing about like young people. A lot of young people are getting their first sort of understanding of, I don't even really have the words for it, but sexual dynamics, sexual norms from porn.
And there's nothing
which is the
normal
most
about
abnormal
it's not real
presentation of human sexuality that there is. And so that I mean, that's a real thing. You can let us know what you think about this. I mean, in Alberta right now, and I sure appreciate Dr. DeGagne's comments at the end. It felt like, I mean, she sort of just gave us the perfect focus at the end of the conversation talking about curriculum, because in particular in Alberta now, as you know, that the curriculum review is underway, and it feels like it's been going on forever. And this is kind of one of those really hot button things where proponents for the review will say, well, we need to take out some of the, I mean, don't get me started on like discovery math and all that kind of stuff. And then others will say, look at who this previous conservative government hired to author some of the new social studies curriculum, a guy that basically denied the legacy of residential schools, this Chris Champion. And you can Google it. You can look back through our archives. We've done a ton of shows and interviews about the Alberta curriculum. But in particular, one of the interesting dynamics right now and Danielle Smith campaigned on this, is an open-mindedness and an inclination to support more homeschooling and private schools and charter schools. I am a graduate of private schools. I went to private and public schools. We probably all know somebody who homeschools their kids. They're not inherently bad, but there are a lot of reasons why some people might choose homeschooling. And a big one of those, if you talk to homeschoolers and homeschool lobbies and associations, they'll say they don't want sex ed presented to their kids in schools. Yeah. They don't want it. They want their kids to learn about sex in the home. They want they don't want teachers talking to their kids about, they'll say like homosexuality or the homosexual lifestyle. You know what I mean?
No,
and
it's
this
ridiculous.
is a big thing, and it's probably more of an issue in Alberta than anywhere else. I mean, Alberta's one of the only provinces, if not the only one, I might be wrong, fact check me, Real Talkers, but the only one that has as much support financially and otherwise for charter and independent schools, private schools, and homeschools than any other province.
And you see these people walking into council this week. Those people literally, those are the people who had improper or not enough sex education, and you want them to homeschool their kids? Like,
the parents' rights movement is a powerful one, though, man.
I know, and I get
Alberta,
it. It's your kid.
Particular.
It's your right to give them what they need and what they want, and it's up to you. But it just seems like a cycle. You know what I mean? And I loved what you said during the interview, saying, "Hey, maybe this won't be an issue," because it does. You talk to the younger kids nowadays. God, I feel old when I say that, but
no, but it's true.
Because I consider myself young still, but they don't care.
No.
Like, most of this shit is not on their radar at all.
100%.
They're not out protesting and doing all this stuff. Like, they don't care.
Yeah.
It's not an issue to them.
This conversation, of course, featuring two Athabasca University professors. We want to remind you about AU. You can check it out online at athabascau.ca. It's Canada's open university, and one of the reasons why literally tens of thousands of post-secondary learners in Canada are pursuing their post-secondary dreams at AU is because of the flexibility that it offers for you to learn at your own pace on a schedule that suits your lifestyle. Your only commute is to your device, and so listen, if you want to hammer down and complete maybe a semester ahead of schedule, you can do it. If something happens in your personal life, or maybe you just need a break and you need to pump those brakes a little bit, that's no problem either. You're not missing a bunch of classes. You're not falling behind. And how about this? More than 95% of Athabasca University grads are satisfied with the quality of their education. That's wild. 95% of their grads would recommend AU to others. And 9 out of 10 grads, nearly 90%, say that they are in a job related to their field of study. That's a big deal. I don't have to tell you. If you're thinking of maybe broadening your horizons, of pursuing a new career or post-secondary education path, take a couple minutes this weekend and check out athabascau.ca. Wanted to give a big shout out to our friends at Eden Landscaping. Mike and his team, right now this is their busiest time of year. They've spent the winter and the early spring designing outdoor spaces based on people's dreams of transformation, front yards, backyards, you name it. And now, well, it's shovels in the ground. Mike and his team are a full-service landscape contractor, which means that you're not having to go hire an excavator and then find somebody who can run the natural gas line out to the garage, find somebody else who can lay the stone, and then the sod guy's not calling you back. Why isn't he calling you back? It's not your problem. Eden, from start to finish, handles your job from dream to reality. Check them out online right now, landscapeedmonton.ca. Their portfolio, absolutely amazing. You can ask him questions. Mike's very proud if you talk to him about his problem-solving ability. So you've got that pesky issue in your yard, the one that you've just learned to live with. Let's turn that trend around, starting with a visit to landscapeedmonton.ca. We love our city, right? Edmontonians. Civic Service Union 52, did you know, has over 50, this is unbelievable. Well, first of all, 6,000 members, but they are serving so many different people. This is really, really a remarkable union, and I want you to check out this website, edmontonforeveryone.ca, where you can learn more about CSU 52. More than 6,000 members working to build an Edmonton with great services, libraries, rec centers, clean water. How about this? Responsible energy. CSU 52 members are behind the scenes to make sure that our city works so that high-demand services are right here around the clock. CSU 52 members are dedicated to an Edmonton you can count on, an Edmonton that's inclusive, that's vibrant, that's connected. CSU 52, an Edmonton for everyone. And before we fire things up here in the studio, let's talk about who built this studio. We built this studio. We built this, what? An unplanned musical interlude. And a shout out to our friends. And I promise I'll never do that again.
Okay.
Complete Care Restoration. They're the ones that problem solved our way into moving into this wonderful space. They've got a lot of experience in navigating difficult situations, and ours relatively easy compared to what they're working on right now. The team at Complete Care is in Alberta communities that have, right now, currently are dealing with fire damage and flood damage. They're helping people get back on their feet. Sometimes this is really the most difficult time in someone's life. I don't have to explain why. Your family has been impacted by fire or flood. You need a team that you can trust to start that rebuilding process. I'm going to tell you firsthand, you can trust the team at Complete Care Restoration to do a professional job from the minute that they visit you the first time to the last time you see them. That's been our experience. It can be yours as well. You can find the team at Complete Care Restoration online. Check out the sponsors tab on our website or give them a call, 780-454-0776.
Can't wait for the porn episode. You know what I am thankful for?
That's what you took from all of that?
that you and me got our sex education from Sue Johanson and the medical professionals in our lives.
Yeah, man. What an unbelievable legacy she leaves. 93 years of age.
Yeah.
Rest in peace to Dr. Sue Johanson. Every Friday, we give you a chance, and this one's going to knock a few people's socks off, and not necessarily in a good way, but a chance to blow off a little steam, a chance to tell us what you think about the shows that we've been doing or the issues that we've been covering, a chance to have thousands of people hear what you think they need to hear. It's proudly presented by Local Environmental Services. You can check them out online at localenviro.ca. They're also on our website, localenvironmental.ca. A proud presenter of Trash Talk. All right, this one from Frosty, who wrote into the show after Johnny and I were talking, we were talking to our good buddy just the other day, Nasher. Jeff Nash came in to talk about the National Hockey League getting rid of warm-up jerseys like those for Pride. And
what did he say?
Well, Frosty says, hey, Jespo, maybe people don't want woke bullshit crammed down their throats anymore. Just wait. We give Pride a whole month, and we give our war veterans a single day. First responders don't get much either. Yeah, apples and apples, Frosty. Great comparisons. Says companies should leave politics and woke ideology out of their business. Hockey is for everyone to enjoy. Yeah, that's right, Frosty. Even the homophobes. How about this one from Gary, who says, I'm listening to your show, Ryan, and I believe you have a misunderstanding of those with religious concerns around Pride. It's not that they're not accepting of people or their flags. They cannot stand with this flag because of, you're not going to like this, the things that people do is sin, and that's against their beliefs. Just wait, Johnny. The same stand would be if someone was for murder, and they were against murder. Just wait. And they would be against murder. They also recognize they are not perfect, and people are not perfect. They recognize God is for them, and God would be for them if they turn from their sin. It's all about standing up for what's right and truthful. He says there's two sides to the story, and I'm sure that some people are a little too aggressive on both sides. Shall we, or shall we just move on? Feel better?
I'm good.
This one from Lauren, who says, Jespo, I want to thank you in talking about the Titan sub for explicitly putting those rescue efforts, the Titan sub, and that boat where hundreds of migrants lost their lives, Thanks for stacking them up side by side on the show. I was appalled, says Lauren, that 90% of my work colleagues were paying close attention to the submersible story. I thought it was a metaphor, actually, for the sorry state of society. Like watching the billionaire ultra-phallic space race wasn't bad enough. So 4 billionaires and a poor kid trying to please his dad get into an uncertified vessel and then die? Who cares? Now, why is all this latest technology deployed? Millions of dollars spent to rescue them. It's a classic case of fuck around and find out. She says, meanwhile, a bunch of desperate people who worked their asses off for years to pay unsavory characters to get on a leaky, overloaded piece of shit to get out of a terrible situation get noticed and then ignored by folks with resources to save them. What a place. Lauren says, as someone who thinks there's no way humans are the only form of intelligent life in our vast, expanding universe, I also think that other life forms who have figured out interplanetary space travel would observe Earth from a distance. They would do the equivalent of us shaking our heads, and then they'd go look for more intelligent beings to interact with. That from Lauren. And this one from Kat, who says, people seem to think that it's horrible to not feel sympathy for the people who died on that dive to the Titanic. But I can understand it on multiple levels. A lot of people are feeling rage at the 1%, right? And I understand that raw, visceral rage. But that's not why I can't sympathize. Some say I should feel sorry for the families who've lost loved ones. Well, I find it really hard to feel sorry for the poor decision-making of the millionaires and billionaires and their families that we're talking about. What about all the American families who lost family members because corporate profits of pharmaceutical companies were more important than actually saving lives? People that have been forced to choose between food and medicine and then dying because they chose to eat. But I'm supposed to care about the rich people and their families? Wah, 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 says Kat. Millionaires, billionaires actively undermining basic safety regulations for decades, and then they basically take a trip in a vessel from which rescue literally is impossible, and I'm supposed to feel sorry for them in this deregulated world they've been fighting for? They brought this upon themselves. Meantime, says Kat, people are suffering and dying every day due to policies that these people fought for and paid for to make themselves even richer. How many people are suffering or have died in order for these folks to have $250,000 to throw away on a stupid trip to the bottom of the ocean where they can't even see anything? They probably got their money by underpaying and exploiting workers, by investing in companies that underpay and exploit workers. How many families have been broken apart because of opioid addiction so that the Sacklers could become billionaires? How many families are living in poverty because the Waltons have made it corporate policy for Walmart to pay their employees so little that they have to collect food stamps and welfare? That's part of their corporate HR. How many families in Detroit are suffering because of the water there? How many diabetics have died because they can't afford insulin just so pharmaceutical companies can rake in record profits? Why is the first response to inflation to raise interest rates, punishing every normal family in the country while making additional millions for the banks, allowing corporations to continue to gouge customers and rake in record profits? And how many of those families who now have to pay more for loans are missing medical treatments or the opportunity to go to school or driving cars that are unsafe because they can't afford the repairs? The list of normal people victimized by the kinds of people throwing away $250,000 for a vanity trip goes on and on and on. That from Kat. You can be like Kat and send us your rant to talk@ryanjesperson.com. You could hear it on next week's edition of Trash Talk, proudly presented by our friends at Local Environmental Services. Make it a great long weekend. Make it a safe long weekend. Make wise decisions out there. Don't ever drink and drive. We're going to take Monday off, and we'll see you live right here Tuesday from the Real Talk studio.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, executive